Cristo, you were born in Chile, and now you live in the countryside in southern Germany. And after several years working in Barcelona as a graphic designer, you moved to Berlin, where you made the leap into illustration. And working between commissioned and personal work, you also switch between digital and analog processes. And your work has been published in international media such as the New York Times, the National Geographic, and many, 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 many others. If you look at your website, you've got hundreds of things in there. And you also show your work in different galleries in Spain, Portugal, Italy, and Chile, and Germany as well, in terms of, I remember I saw your work at the Geswalder. Awesome. So if I just hand over to you, and yeah, you go on and do your presentation, that'd be amazing. Thank you, Cristo.
Okay. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you, all you guys. It's very nice to be here speaking with you. Yeah, I grew up in Chile in the Atacama Desert. This a little small city, and I grew up by the beach in this amazing natural setting. And for me was very impressive to have in one hand the cold Pacific Ocean, and in the other side this huge mountains. That's this encounter between ocean and desert was really inspiring for me as a child. So this was my very strong memory that I have. And I grew up there very happy. And when I finished my school, I wanted to study graphic design, because in this time was not really clear. So illustration was at this time more representation of reality. Illustration in Chile in the 80s, end of the 80s, was part of, was a kind of, there's a lot of illustrators working in advertising, doing like realistic things. So I wanted to escape from this, and I wanted to figure out to start graphic design, because I was really interested in graphic and visual. So I started graphic design, and I was very lucky that I have a university. I entered in the university where the focus was really interesting, was a really artistic approach, when for me it was a turning point in my life to discover the art of watching, of observation, as a form of nonverbal communication, and drawing things, everyday things like objects and people, and try to learn how to see, to be aware of these objects and their forms. So it was the first door, the first approach to abstract world. And yeah, for me it was first time to this approach to the shapes, to the colors, and that was interesting we spend a lot of time drawing in the university and to develop concept. So it was really interesting to have strong, the idea behind of graphic design is you have to work with ideas, with concept, shapes, and colors, and of this formal things. So the first 2 years were very amazing. And then I realized I did an internship in a graphic design studio, but I realized that graphic design world was for me too quiet, too regular, and you have to work very close to a client, and this client had some desires. So I realized I didn't want to sit in the front of computer making design. So I worked 1 year and saved some money, and I decided to go to Spain because I wanted to see other world, other reality. I was 22, I was hungry of new experience, and I didn't want to be to start working in a serious agency. I wanted to have some experience. So I take a plane to Barcelona, with no plan, with no visum. Also, was a very crazy decision. So the first 2 months they were great. But I realized that after after 3-4 months, I realized this was really expensive. I didn't have a work. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a visum. Also, if you want to work, you have to have a visum. So I was quite shocked. So I started to search some work, and I did a lot of odd jobs, like working in restaurants and bars. And one day I called to some graphic design agencies, and they took me, and they say my boss said to me, okay, you are an artist, but if you can do some graphic design work, you can work with me. And so it was great. It was the first time that I thought, okay, that's my first big step. So then I started working there. But after 1 year, 2 years, I had the same feeling that I had in Chile. So I was just working in an office, doing some graphics, sitting on the computer. But at the same time, I enjoy my free time. And I call this time so incubation time. When you are doing some regular job, quite boring, but at the same time you are doing in your free time other things like watching films, listen music, seeing films, knowing people. That for me, this 3 years they were very, very rich in a sense of to have some experience in another country, and it was great. But then in Barcelona, I met my girlfriend. So she is German. So we decided together to go to Berlin, and this was another step that for me was quite risky. And it was the first time that I had the feeling I was 30 years old. So I wasn't so young. So it was the first time that I thought, okay, that's also a turning point for me. I don't want to work as graphic designer anymore. So I decided to jump to freelance illustrator. So I keep 1 year working for graphic design studios, doing some labels, and I tried always to make some graphic design, trying to implement some illustrations. And little by little, I started doing like cover books and wine labels and some illustrated graphic design. So there was a point that I thought, okay, let's do the jump. So I did a portfolio just with illustrations, and I started to send emails. And at this time, internet was a very strong spreader, so it still is there, but started this kind of Pinterest and Found and Flickr. So internet was really important to get my first commissions as illustrator. So that's part of my biography from my life when I started studying, and then I started as an illustrator. And right now I will try to talk about what are the points important in my work as an illustrator or as an artist. For me, randomness is a very important point in my work. As you can see, my life, my biography is a kind of randomness. It's a mix of randomness actions. So I decided to go to Barcelona without a plan, and I decided to go to Berlin with a little bit plan, but not so much. And I started to learn German, and these actions for me that were risky, but they were very important part of my career. So I don't know if you know, John Cage is a composer, he's a musician, artist, and I used to use him as example What for me it's really meaning is the main part of the composition process and this randomness where it comes from. He used to define a composition as a very simple example. If you go by a walk on a beach and you collect stones and shells, then you get home, you see all these treasures of different size, colors, and shapes. And you get a composition. You are acting as a curator. You are collecting things that you like, but you are not conscious about this process. And that's a really, really simple example of what, for me, my process is. I'm collecting things that I like and that I'm putting together, and I try to mix it up under my influence. And my influence, it's related to my biography, to my things that I like, things that I see, people that I know, inspiring things that you can find everywhere. And this process that John Cage defined, very good defined with this walk into the beach with collecting stones and shells, that's for me the best sample of randomness. And he said also, nothing is a mistake. There's no win and no fail. There's only make. And this quote, for me, it's also very important, because mistakes, as I said, with these random decisions in my life, mistakes are very important in your life. You are learning a lot from mistakes. So that's what I try to work in my illustration process. I try to collect elements, to draw on these elements, and let the accidents to go in my work. So if I see forms, interesting colors, or interesting subjects, I try to put it together. This is one part. Other part is I call setting. That's for me, it's atmospheres, scenes. This was a series that I did for, it's a personal work that was selected for Biennale in Portugal. I tried to work with empty spaces. I tried to work with the concept of to create a situation, a setting where people are doing some actions, but you don't really know what they are doing, and there's some presence of someone that it's in white, that it's not defined, who is this person, but everyone is really interested in this. This white, this emptiness is attracting the other people, and this attraction, I try to put the focus on the attraction, but I tried not to define what is it, on who is this guy, who is this person. The focus is more, why are these people there and what are they doing there? And these questions are for me also important when I create a setting or a scene, to have some characters interacting and some randomness, but they're constructing together a meaning. I have some references for me that also I really love this Persian art, and also religious, in general, religious art, because they have scenes and they have this flat perspective when you can see everything or almost everything, and you can see the actions in a very general vision perspective. So you can choose where to put your eye. You can choose if you go to the little corner where this guy with the red clothes are, or you are trying to figure out why are they doing this small people there, and why the window is open. This kind of questions for me are really, really important. I try to create this stage where people are acting. This is an illustration I did for a book from a German writer, and it's a book really really strange story, a really funny story. It's about COVID in the countryside, in a village, and suddenly there's some zombies in the village. It's a kind of mix of science fiction, but with the COVID as background subject. So yeah, I try to make this stage like this shadow theater, that you have the flat characters interacting with a very central element, that in this case is the couple. What they are doing, why this guy is with an arrow in his bag. And so I try to put this meaning element, so symbolic elements, and in a central focus. These scenes, they're also part of the series that I did a couple of years. I will speak later about that, Palo Santo. And yeah, I tried the same. I tried to define some scenes where the people are doing some actions. In this case, I tried to create some civilization, a fiction civilization, and this is a battle scene where they are trying to fighting. They are fighting for territory, or for it's the reasons are open, but the important thing is the composition, and that you can find like funny situations in this dramatic stage. Like people, if you go in the details, you know if they're dancing or they're fighting, and they're wearing masks. So yeah, I tried to put some detail. Other point for me is really important is the rawness. That it's yeah, that's for me. It comes probably from my music taste, from punk music, do-it-yourself culture. So I reject the idea that art or drawing is a special gift that's almost divine. That's it's very it's a general idea that you can find in some schools, art schools, or also in your familiar conversations when the people ask what are you doing, and you say I'm an illustrator and artist. So artists are kind of God, is, oh wow, you're an artist. So for me, this rawness is part of this do-it-yourself culture, and art can be a gesture, it can be a provocation. This is a piece of Gordon Matta Clark. He's an architect, an artist. He died very young, but he used to make this building cuts. He just cuts buildings. And he did some kind of sculptures inside of the building. I mean, from the building, he made this provocation from this mainstream architecture. And these are some piece of Bill Traylor at the left. He's an outsider artist, and Violeta Parra at the right side. She's a Chilean, also a musician and artist. I love so much this a drawing or representation without limits of if you are drawing reality or drawing fiction, no fear of proportion, just as a gesture of communications or something symbolic. And all all these pieces, they have this vibration, this power, and I believe everybody has the power of do these great things. This is an example what doing wrong. No, it's a joke, but it's an example of my work that I didn't like it. At the right, you have the finished work that I didn't like the results because it's so overworked. At the left side, you see the paper pieces and so much expressive. They have so much power, much more vibration. And at the right side, it's like some reality, shadows and characters, and you have the real proportion between the volcano and the houses. So that's a good example that I try not to overwork my work, my illustration or my artistic work. I try to keep this rawness, to keep this, the material speak for itself. So other point is really important. It's spiritual world or Andean cultures. That's exploring a little bit my roots, because I'm from Arica, this small city that I told you, and there's a meeting point of a lot of cultures, pre-Columbian cultures between Chile, Peru, Bolivia. This was before Columbus. This was a common culture that is very complex to understand, and I started to study it like 4 years ago when I started this area, Palo Santos area that I will speak later. For example, they have a very special concept of time. Here we can see our Occidental concept of time. We are in the present, and the future is in front of us, and the past is behind us. And you see the future. But for Andean cultures, it's opposite. The future is behind us because we can't see that. We can see it. It's unknown for us. And the past is at the front of us because we know the past. It's at the front of us. So that's really, really interesting, because that means that past is with us, past live with us. And they believe that time is just an organic circle, that it changes. So the present, it moves between past and future. And they have a strong belief that the dead, their ancestors, they live together. They had a lot of rituals with dead people. They communicated with dead people through everyday situations like eating. They have some rituals where they sat together and they put a dish and a glass for the ancestors that they didn't exist, but they are present. So that's really interesting, because it changed a little bit this concept of this linear concept of time. So and I started to explore the different symbols, and it's really interesting that they didn't have a writing system. They didn't write. So they developed a symbolic alphabet, a visual communication system that's really interesting. So they represent really important things or important topics. That everything is related with nature. And animals, they were sacred, some animals. For example, here at the left side, we see this a pelican. Pelican were also sacred birds, and they use a lot of pelicans in their representation. So they use rags for communicate, to tell stories. So we have papers and and letters and a normal alphabet. And this accidental thing that, so in the Andean cultures, they have like this symbolic way to read. So they told stories through the rags and through woven, and that's really interesting. So with this background, so I started to make this series, this collage series that's called Palo Santo, where I took a fiction role of Humboldt, Alexander von Humboldt. I don't know if you know him. He was a scientist, artist, and he did he traveled a lot through America, exploring and drawing and making some experiments. So this character for me is really inspiring. That I put myself in the role of an explorer artist entering in this new world. So I took a lot of cultures from Chile. They are Selknams from the south of Chile, and they have so interesting visual elements. So I tried to collect them and try to investigate a little bit. So yeah, I used a drawing as a way to create this world. I tried to create some sacred animals. I tried to create sacred animals and people. So I started drawing, and I'm drawing a lot, creating, making some creators, and this relationship between humans and forces of nature, because in Latin America and Chile, there's a lot of movement on the earth. There's a lot of earthquakes, and a lot of volcanoes, and that's part very important for those cultures. So
I love these, Cristo. They're amazing.
So I pick up some elements as rituals. So like burial rituals. They buried their ancestors with objects and with very special clothes, because they thought that the dead people is going to be part of this new life with new clothes and with new objects. So the burials are full of objects and clothes. So this is in this scene, I try to build in abstract way how they are constructing, how they are putting together some stones, and yeah, and the Ocean Pacific at the side. And this I also try to represent some ritual. So little babies, when they died, they put in on sacrifice on volcanoes also. So this tried to represent this volcano and all this nature's forces inside. This also part of this series. I used to they used to put some masks to dead people. Also to start this trip to the new life, and to protect them from bad spirits. And yeah, there's a lot of animal representation, animals from the desert. Yeah, I try to be the explorer, the fictional explorer who enters in this new world, describing these everyday scenes. And yeah, and to finish, I will speak about my process. I use natural pigments because I like the way that they are not so bright. I try to. I was searching for some colors that are not so bright, not so shiny. So I found in pigments, this textures, it's like more natural. So I mix it up sometimes with watercolor and with graphite powder. So you reach this texture like more earthy. Then I make the drawings in paper, and then I make like areas where then I cut the paper. So you can see how I cut with a cutter. And then I just paste it together. Sometimes also for faces, for little details, I use the pencil or a brush. Here's a little bit the process. It's very graphic. Describe it. This randomness or this. I try to mix this randomness, but also I make some sketches before. So I make the drawing before with the scene. I try to set a scene or a character, and then with the forms, I play a little bit. And I love the way that you can design a little bit, you can compose. So because you can move the elements, you can move the forms, the shapes, and the colors. So that's a great way to me to decide. It's a little bit a design process also. So this the final. You can see at the first I had the sun behind the bird, but in the last minute I decided to put behind the tree. And yeah, here there's also an interesting process because I didn't make a plan, I didn't make a sketch. I just put together some shapes that I found, and I did a mountain, and yeah, that's the final. All this work I did last year during the COVID situation. I didn't have commissions, so I started to make some paintings and drawings and collages, and was really good. Yeah, and how it's that is how it looks my table. A lot of papers, mess, but yeah, this is another kind of process is similar, but I didn't use a piece of papers, so I wanted to draw directly.
It hasn't oh, it's just loaded.
Sorry?
It's just loaded. It was a little fraction loading, okay. But it's gone. It's there now.
It's okay, yeah. And I wanted to work also, I worked with a powder, the graphite powder, that is great because you can erase. If you can see at the left side, this cactus, you can erase with an eraser, and so you can put down some colors and put up some layers. So that's also really good. That's the last one, the final one. It's also an example of the process, randomness, or to figure out, to compose with the papers. And it's really fun. And it's a very important moment when you clear all elements, when you put together on the paper and you say, okay, that's it. And that's like the click moment. You say, it's done. Yeah, this is for my personal work. I tried to do my commission as well. It's very similar. I work for my commission work. I work with Photoshop, and going back, it's really similar. So because I work with textures, and I put them up, and I put it together with mask in Photoshop. But in this case, I wanted to explain the editorial process. This, in my opinion, is interesting. It's really fun, and it's very challenging because you have to work really fast. Sometimes I got an email from, for example, for the New York Times, and I need to make something in 4 hours. So that's quite challenge and difficult, but it makes a lot of fun. For example, that's a text. You receive the text, you read the text, and then you read again, then you read again, and you and I start to select some words. I start to make a kind of collage, text collage, to have the important text, important things that I consider important. And then I go for a walk. I go for a John Cage walk. So you have emotions, you have words, a lot of words. You have a ton of voice. You have visual elements. For example, this article was about whales in the Gulf of Mexico. There's really threat of extinction because there's so much traffic, and the whales are so sensitive with noise. And the Gulf of Mexico is so noisy because the traffic that the whales are dying. So the article was really interesting, was very emotional also. And yeah, in this walk I have some interesting things. And then you start to make sketches. You have to make sketches in 2 hours or sometimes in 1.5 hours. Really, really fast. So I did some sketches that tried to represent this threatness from the traffic, from the human activity that are conducting to the whales to die. So they choose this one because it's more clear, the human activity. There's some stress in the picture. There's some stress, there's some mess on these ships. So this is the last one, the final one. I always try to reduce elements, not to overwork, not to make so much details. So I try always to make the shapes very clear, that you can identify the elements. If you see the image in small squares, that you can still see the whale and the chips. Yeah, that's a brief talk about my work. I don't know if we are on time. If you have some questions, I'm really happy to answer some questions.
That was wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Just reading some comments, Christo. So I'll just keep going. That was amazing, wonderful, wow, clap, clap. That was epic, amazing, Christo, amazing. Thank you, you're a legend. Thank you, Christo. That was super interesting and insightful. What materials did you use to create the whale? And then the next one is thanks, loving seeing your process.
Yeah, I can answer about the whale.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I use for the editorial work. I use, as I said, I work with Photoshop, and I have a lot of resources in a folder with textures. So I use paper textures that I paint myself, and I just scan and I use. And then in Photoshop you can change a little bit the contrast, but it's there. I use a lot of textures from papers. Yeah, and whale is a paper. Yeah, it's a paper with pigments.
There was one thing I was going to say. I was listening to an interview by John Klassen this morning, and he was talking about the work that he did for his latest book, the Rock book, and he was talking about the noise in the textures, and that's so important to get right, isn't it? And because of your process is so random, it's really important just to keep going until you get the right texture, isn't it?
Yeah, it's completely. Yeah, John Klassen is the best sample. His books are really, they have a really interesting approach to the text, because it's really simple, but the text always walking together with the illustrations, and they're sometimes difficult to find in picture books, that it's not like one-to-one. that they are walking together but separately. And by John Clason, it's great. Yeah.
Yeah, and also he was talking about how he can't draw, like you were saying about, you know, it's not important to be a master at drawing, it's kind of what you've got to say, and you know, the journey you've been through and how you put that into your work. And it was just really interesting how he uses that to his advantage. So he actually, you know, he can't draw very well, so he does it really simply, and he uses his graphic design and his animation skills. I thought that was fascinating as well.
Yeah, it's really,
there's another question here.
It's really interesting how you can turn your failures or your limits in going ahead to develop your voice, because everyone has a voice, has a different voice, and that's a beautiful thing. Every voice is beautiful. So
yeah, absolutely. Another question: do you find that after your thinking walk, your final thumbnails are very initial sketches, or do you have to do a lot of thumbnail before you get to your final 3 sketches?
Oh yeah, yeah. This sketch process is really crazy. I make a lot of sketches, so many, and sometimes a couple of lines, sometimes more complicated. So I use a lot of paper. So yeah, sketches are really important. I didn't mention that, but it's true. Sketches are part of my work, and for me it's a part of thinking. So getting a John Cage walk, after this John Cage walk is the sketch process. That's also a kind of walk, because you are sketching so fast that I try not to think about, and it's, yeah, sketches is very, very important to find the idea,
emptying your mind,
to find the idea, to find the concept, or to find the tone, to find the emotion, to find the composition, and yeah.
And I know Sam, who is a fellow editorial illustrator, and yeah, you're very similar process in that way to Sam. And I think Sam and all of us are always banging on to our students, you must sketch, you must do thumbnails, and you know, not for every piece.
Yeah, I know.
It's come in and preach the good word of thumbnails when we're going on about it all the time. I'm glad.
Yeah. I know some illustrators that they don't work so much with sketches. They think an idea and then they make the final one. And it's also, for me, it's really interesting. It's another process. It's another way of thinking also. Yeah.
Yeah, it's about finding your own way, isn't it? But I think when you're learning, I think it's important to, you've got to do everything before you know what you don't want to do. And I think, you know, and it to suit your conditions as well. Next question: do you have any artist books or books that you would recommend on Andean culture of why birds are seen as sacred? I'm interested in drawing birds and raising awareness on how to protect them, so found that really interesting and cool. That's lovely.
Yeah, I have some books that I can recommend. I can send to you the links or the names. I don't have in mind right now, but I can send you an email, and
or even just a photograph of them, Christo, or you know, whatever you've got, and I'll post them on the Google Classroom link where this was posted initially.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
And I think that's one thing I find fascinating about your work. And when I was talking to you a while back, we were talking about how your influence comes from definitely, you know, your culture, but also the cultures that are looking the world in a different way. That graph that you showed with the past and future, oh my God, my mind is blown, just because that was such a beautiful way of looking at it. And I know that the staff here would have chimed with that as well. They would have gone, oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah, it's great. For me, it was also interesting to discover that, because it's amazing to think that idea. I love the idea that we live in a parallel world. I don't know if you know the film A Ghost Story.
Story.
A ghost story. It's a very simple idea that it's a house, and the house is habitated by some people. And then in the years, they're coming new people to live in this house, but the ghost from the house is still there. So everybody is living together in this house with these ghosts. It's very. I love this idea that past mixed with the future, that everything's together, because it has a lot of sense in a spiritual way. That I have to say that I'm very obsessed with the death as a topic. And for me, death is a celebration of life also. And reading about Andean cultures, it makes for me a lot of sense.
Sky burials, that's something I'm fascinated with. And yeah, you just see death in a completely different way when you're putting the physical body back into the world, and back into nature. Yeah, it's such a beautiful thing. Next question. This is from Bridget, one of our colleagues. Interesting to hear about the work responding to Andean stories and culture. Did you make all of these during lockdown? Presumably you were in Germany and couldn't go to Chile. Did you feel compelled to make work that related to your own heritage? Nice question.
Yeah, that's a good question. And no, I did this Palo Santos area before lockdown. This was 1 year before. But regarding the question, did you feel compelled to make a work that related to your heritage? I think when you live out of your country, you are constantly confronted to your heritage, and that's a good thing to go out, that you have another perspective. And when I was living in Chile, I grew up under dictatorship, Pinochet dictatorships. That wasn't a good access to culture, to our culture. So yeah, to living outside, and it gives you another perspective to see your roots. And I was in Arica, in my city, 3 years ago, and for me it was everything new, and it was like, wow, it's like Mars. It's like desert. There's nothing here, just stones. And how could I live here? I mean, it's really impressed that you are very isolated there, and this kind of cultures, Andean cultures, they disappeared. They completely were killed, and they didn't have a writing system. So you have just visual things, just symbolic things that people still are trying to figure out what they mean. It's really interesting.
It's all fascinating. There's another question. Do you have any advice on using the contrast of textures to show that one thing is very smooth and the other is very dense, like a lot of plants, very specific, I know. Do you have any
contrast of textures? One thing is very smooth and the other very dense. Ooh,
so I guess when you've got a lot of details on the page and it's maybe plants, you know, I guess
I used to I love the function in Photoshop, the threshold, to make a lot of contrast, and I use this with textures to make like grainy, to reduce the middle textures, and that's very raw with threshold in Photoshop.
I guess it's also about getting the right kind of amount of detail on top of each other in the layers, isn't it? And maybe one's a kind of the shape makes a difference, or the other, if you've got a different shape but then you've got a really loud texture, it's just kind of understanding the weight of texture versus shape and all of those things, isn't it? It's a real skill, and it comes through time of just making failures, doesn't it?
Yeah, I try also to use, I love the way to use shapes instead of lines. There's a lot of illustrators that work with lines, and for me it's a way to hide my difficultness to draw. Because for me it's difficult to draw with lines. I always make horrible lines. I can't draw a straight line. So shapes is a way, for me, is a way to, it's a good way to, yeah, to reach my objectives.
Yeah, and I think being a graphic designer, you're so aware of
Yeah,
composition
that's
and
true.
negative space, and I think that's really apparent in your work as
Yeah,
well.
color, shapes, and that's important. Yeah.
And what I love about your work is when you've got the collage, but you've got the details in the water of the people, which looks like an etching. I'm presuming is that pencil, and you've literally just taken the white out and obviously put it on top of the texture.
Yeah, I use a lot of textures from etching, also from lithography and seal screen. So yeah, I love my background. I used to, in the university, I used to work a lot with print techniques. And in Berlin, I did 1 semester in the UDK doing some lithography. Wow, that was lithography. I didn't know that you have to clean the stone so much time.
Oh yeah, I know. A friend of both of ours, but obviously more of you, Christina, who's going to be coming to talk to our MA students in May sometime, or June, I think. And she does printmaking, doesn't she? And just looking at what she kind of does with, you know, her printmaking, it's incredible. Yeah. So there's a huge amount of not knowing in printing, isn't there? And printmaking, which brings up so many beautiful textures and lines.
Yeah, and the beautiful from printmaking is that you have always a surprise at the results. It's very surprising because you plan something, but at the end you get another thing, and that's beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. So I just go through. So Cristóbal has a very beautiful brain. Oh. That's a lovely comment. And then it says, I love your outlook on life, Cristo. Me too, Cristo. I can really relate to discovering your own culture and after leaving home and coming home again. Yeah, I can as well. And then looking at your heritage and culture can be really inspiring. Yes. And then Taryn says, thanks. Yeah, I'm drawing marble statues among dense plants and moss. And I really want to show how smooth they are in contrast to their environment, make them feel more alien. I get you. Yeah, so actually using, that contrast of, so when you want contrast, use a completely different material or way of working, and that really, really helps that.
Yeah.
So we'll keep an eye on the chat, but I still have these 3 questions that I sent you, so we can just go through those if that's all right.
Yeah.
Then we'll go back, maybe ask the lecturer if they want to kind of ask any questions. So your first one was, how do you find illustration work? I.e., what percentage of your work is approaching industry versus industry approaching you, and how has this changed over the years?
Yeah, it's a mix of both. Back when I started in 2008 as a freelance illustrator, it was really important. I get a lot of commissions because my work has some wide visibility on internet. I received emails from agency and some art directors. I didn't make so much to show my work at the beginning. Then 3 years later, it was quite different. I did some marketing actions, like some writing emails, contacting art directors, magazines. I always went to a books shop in Berlin, and I saw always the little the last page with the art director or with a graphic design studio to try to find where to reach these people. And then I was working 5 years as a fixed illustrator for Lufthansa, and that's where it was really good. I was a safe work. 5 years that I had some monthly assignment, and I didn't search so much work. But before COVID and after COVID, it's quite difficult. So I used to do a marketing action, searching art directors and writing emails, trying to update my website each 6 months, sometimes difficult, each 1 year probably. I have the feeling that illustration market is very saturated right now, and it's difficult to receive assignments. that's why I try to do self-advertising or so social media. Writing emails is like the most activity that I do. Each 2 months, I try to reach some art director or to say, hey, hi, I'm here. It's quite annoying. I don't like that part of the work.
Yeah, and I know. All I was going to say was, I know that you, through COVID, you've lost your staple Lufthansa job, haven't you? In terms of you had like a rolling contract with them, and that's kind of gone, isn't it? So it then kind of spins you into that more, even more random kind of world. Yeah.
Also, I work with an agency in the United States, but it's not working really well. I don't get so much commissions, but I have a lot of illustrator friends that I work really good with agencies. I don't have a good experience with agencies. I think agencies, it makes sense when you start your career with an agency. But when you start your career by yourself, it's difficult to find an agency that represents you in a way, in a good way.
Yeah, that really fits together. Yeah, it's almost like a relationship, isn't it? I think it's harder to find a relationship when you're older than it is when you're younger, because you mold together as opposed to kind of being, you know, we're stuck in our ways.
Yeah.
So the next question, I'm sure all of these will kind of spin into each other. So it says, was your work always editorial design driven, or did you actively change your work to better fit in with an editorial design landscape, and how?
I think because my background as graphic designer, I think my work has always had a very graphic, expressive gesture. So my style has been evolving over the years, and I hope to embrace more areas in the future, such as illustrated books or children's illustration. But I think that was always so strongly editorial design. The style has been evolving for sure, and I hope so. And I am still working in trying different ways. But yeah, I think this was always more editorial design direct.
Yeah, just a observation from me. I always feel that people who have got a real understanding of graphic design and visual communication naturally lend themselves to editorial, because there is that kind of, it's just such an easy, they're quick illustrations, but obviously you need, what I mean is when they're quick illustrations, they're in a newspaper and you turn it over. It's not, you know, it has to capture the audience right there and then, and only the people who have a real understanding of semiotics, you know, visual space, all of that stuff, can do that quickly, and for it to work so quickly as well.
Yeah,
just an observation. So the next question, how intertwined is your personal work with your professional industry work, and how important is that you create work that represents you best? Have you a favorite commission to work on, and why? 2 in 1, sorry.
Yeah, my personal work is really important, as you say, as you see in my presentation. It's the place where I am alone with myself, and it's the place where I really enjoy, because you're free. It's there, your own subjects, your own topics. It's my laboratory where I give free rein to ideas or stories that allow me to experiment. It's really vital, important to me to have the time and space to do that. And in the last 3-4 years, it's quite difficult because I have family also. So I'm parenting is also a full-time job. But it's vital, it's important to have the time and space to do that. And I believe that it's influenced positively in my commercial work, commercial commissions. And I try to try new things. I really enjoy press editorial work when the text is inspiring, because sometimes they have a 2 years ago, I got just like business technology text, and it was so boring. It was so not inspiring. Just drawing people in front of computer or drawing with, it was like so standard things.
There's no nuances, is there?
Yeah, so I really enjoy with the subject. The topics are more open to free interpretation. So so the second question, your favorite commission. Commissions for the New York Times are very special and challenging and writing, as I have very little time. I have to work like this complex topics. Normally the topics that I receive is more like foreign affairs, like the relationship between China and Japan, or exile in Cuba, and there's some political background that it's really complex. I really enjoy it, but it's complex, and I like it because it forces you to be super pragmatic in terms of time. You have to reach this 2 hours, sketches in 2 hours. There's a fact and there's a deadline. Yeah, you are in your artistic world trying to figure out shapes and interpretation, but just in 2 hours. And after this 2 hours, comes another complex process, because sketches is one part, but then to work in the final art, as I say that I don't used to work with lines, and sketches is with lines. Sometimes I have to translate the sketch in this shape world illustration. So it's really stressful. So after when I give the illustration the final and I get the okay, it's like, whew, wow. So I need 1 day to rest, but it's fun. I mean, it's stressful, but it's fun. Yeah, I'm interested in subjects like everything related with human being and cultural aspects, anthropology, political or nature-related manifestation. For me, it's really interesting. I'm very impressed from the topic of culture as a manifestation of a group of people. So when you have a group of people living together, you are starting culture. It's a trace of the human being, and that's, for me, is really interesting. Yeah, as I say, for 5 years ago, I illustrated the Lufthansa magazine, On Board magazine, where the subject were about traveling and with reports around the world. This was very inspiring, illustrating traveling, different places, and this was also very free. The art director was great, so this was a good commission.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, do you think that maybe going back to your personal work and really kind of digging into that might give you some new avenues of kind of and then maybe that might kind of break open your practice again? And then, because I do think that there's a certain energy that natural energy, authentic energy. If it goes into your work, then it is seen more easily. I feel like it puts out that energy to the world. And I wonder sometimes when we get kind of stuck in our ways, into habits, you know, I'm not saying you are, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that, but I'm just wondering if, as the world kind of shuts down with commissions because there's too many people, it's just about going back into yourself. Yeah, and kind of really kind of enjoying what you do. And I think then it kind of refreshes the world to you, if you see what I mean. Yeah,
and it's an opportunity to be aware of your work, also to be aware of what you're doing and why are you doing that. And commissions are great, but are great in all sense, because you have to earn money also, and it's really it's fun, but you need this person. I mean, I need the personal work to develop my ideas, my own ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's one more piece of advice that you were going to give, but we'll leave that right till the end. So if we just, we've got 15 minutes left. So if we just open it up to anybody else who has questions, but also my colleagues.
Yep.
That'd be amazing.
I just wanted to say this has been great. I think I've been a fan of your work for quite a while, Christo, and it's just been lovely hearing you talk about it. And it's especially nice hearing. It reminds me of the way that we've had a few other visiting lecturers talk about in different ways and different flavors about the way that it is. If you're doing it for yourself, then you'll always be okay, more or less, even when you don't get any commercial work or when there's a lull. If you can find a way to do it for yourself, it's like that will sustain you. And I just I find that really sort of a really hopeful outlook. So yeah, it's just really lovely to hear.
Thank you. Yeah.
You see what Alicia's just said. This has been lush. Thank you. Thanks, Alicia. Anybody else? Dun, dun, dun. If there isn't, then so somebody was asking after your Instagram, so we've just sent them to that. One question I've got actually in terms of your name. So I'm a little bit confused on my website about, I've got Antidote Press, which is my small press, but I've also got Caroline Pedler, which is my illustrated name. And originally it was to do with the fact that I had very commercial work and I had my very personal work, and I didn't want to interfere the two. But now that I'm kind of almost lost all my commercial work, I need to kind of really go with the personal work, and I need to clean it up. So you have Namonki. What does that mean? And what, Cristóbal is your name, Schmal, but why have you chosen that name? And do you find that a problem? Is that a problem for you, or is that something that doesn't really fit?
Yeah, that's a good question. When I started doing my portfolio, I was on this do-it-yourself thing and this street art, and I wanted to have a tag, not my real name. So I found no mono, because in Spain and Chile, you say it like an illustrator or a drawer. You say people that say like doodles, you say you are doing monos, and monos is it means monkey. It's like you are doodling, so you're doing monos. You're drawing monkeys. So I thought no mono was a very funny game of words. And I started to making some logos, and it worked really well with the no mono, because it's like yeah, it was funny to design that. But then I realized that I didn't want it to anymore. And my website is still there, Art No Mono, and I tried to put it in another domain, Cristóbal Schmal. I don't know. I think that it became more serious, and I wanted that my name, because as I said at the beginning, is you can't separate your life when you work, when you're doing some artistic work, illustration work. For me, it's everything's together. So I decided to put my name, and so yeah, No Mono was at the beginning, and they're still there, and some years ago, I thought and separate like my artistic work, like my collage, and then another website went commissions. But then I thought, I think in some point it came everything together, and so I don't know. I'm not sure. I was speaking with art galleries last year in Berlin, because I wanted to get close to galleries and to make the art market. And he told me that they don't like so much, galleries, they don't like so much this figure, that illustrator artist. And so he recommended me to make another website with my artistic work.
Interesting.
I was surprised. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not the best marketing guy. Probably it's a good idea to make separately, but I don't know. It's just like that, and No Mono is still there, but Cristóbal Schmal is also there. Yeah.
I think sometimes you're almost too busy doing the work to worry about what you look like on the outside, which obviously with our students in mind, that's not what we want to teach them. We want them to, to get your outward facing profile sorted before you get into the, so that it's nice and clean entry. But yeah, interesting.
I think the main thing is that your work has to be coherent. And I have the feeling that with my latest personal work, they're coming together. They're not more separated, and I think that is a good feeling, that to put everything together. It depends of coherent. If it's so different, your commission and your personal work, that maybe it makes sense to make it separately. But if they touch them, or I think it's not a bad idea to put them together.
I'm just going to put your website address in the chat, because it'd be good for people to have a look at it. I think looking at your website, let's have a look at it now. I was looking at it and looking at how you can see that you're central to every piece of work that you do, even though you might have like a line work cartoon or an animation, or the work that you've got in the gallery. I think that's up at Gazada maybe. And then you've got very graphic kind of bottles, and it goes on and on and on. And I just think that you are the perfect example of somebody who does lots of different things, but your work looks like you. And I don't know if it's because of the shapes you use, and it's a kind of this, you know, your ideas come from that one obsession about anthropology, about people, about kind of how they move, how they act, how they interact with each other. And it is consistency. It is, yeah. Thank you, Lisa. And just think that's really important to kind of highlight. Really.
Yeah. Yeah, in the last year, I was also interested in cartoons, and back to my roots also, because when I was little, I remember I was very obsessed with cartoons, and then I lost the interest in comics. I don't know, in the university, comics were like a big topic, and for me it was so boring. I was so overwhelmed with comics. There's so much information in a page. I was exhausted after reading some comic. So, and right now I am getting a lot of interest in cartoons, in small situations, and humor, black humor or ironic situations that I thought that everyday things that, and yeah, it's make a lot of fun too. It's a kind of new storytelling thing that I'm discovering.
Yeah, me too, actually, as well. I've actually got this little red book. It's basically about the experiences of being a neurodiverse person in the world. And I don't know if it's lockdown that's given me a little bit of space. It's so much fun, isn't it? I love it.
Yeah,
I'm doing the same thing. Okay, so if anybody hasn't got anything else to say or any more questions,
can I just say one thing? I just wonder whether. So you say you ages ago you were advised to have a different website for your personal work than you were for your commissioned work, and I think coming from, I'm not an illustrator, I'm a fine artist, so looking at it the other way around, there's a massive crossover that a lot of fine artists are doing stuff that could be considered to be illustration. So I don't think the distinction is there so much. And I think what Caroline says, how your work has an absolute visual language of its own, whether it's a commission or your own work. So I kind of feel like the way you were talking about it as well, it would just, you know, it'd fit perfectly in a gallery and wouldn't appear to be at odds with it at all. So I just think it's, like you say, it can float between the two of them, and I don't think people judge it anymore.
No,
one thing being one thing and one thing being another.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and this interesting thing that I was busy thinking about that the intersection between art and illustrations is difficult to find. This in between point. There's galleries for art, and there's galleries for illustration. There are more, how you say, more in comic or more in pop culture oriented, but contemporary illustration is difficult to find. So a place or to a niche space for that. And That's I think for me it's there's no borders. Illustration, micronation work, and art is just an artistic approach and a vision. Yeah, it's interesting topic.
And I think illustrators are breaking boundaries in terms of, you know, those exact boundaries. And I wonder if it's the DIY culture that is kind of enabling that niche to have a space. And I mean that by, so for example, we went to Bologna with Christina and we met Manuel Marcel and we met a couple of other really amazing illustrators in a small exhibition space in the middle of Bologna. And it was full of kind of things to sell, but also these amazing pieces of artwork on the wall. Like it was a proper artist gallery with sculptures and things. And it's those events that I've been going to, you know, around those kind of things that give that space. And I think in London, in all the cities it happens. I think in Plymouth it's starting to happen as well. And I think it's us doing it for ourselves, almost. I know you work with Valerio Vidali and, you know, Jesus and all those kind of people. And it's just getting together and building these collectives. And Javier Zabala, he built a collective and he made that beautiful book, The Carnets, of his sketchbooks, and that came out of this collective. And I think for our students, I think that's so important to understand that it's about doing it for yourself and getting together with like-minded people and producing and making the space and making the niche for you, rather than trying to fit into the world. I think that's what we need now more than ever.
Do you think it's also maybe to do with the intention behind the work? I'm not saying about when it's commissioned, it's a different intention. But if you're making the work for yourself, and it's, you know, it's based on these legends and stories and your thoughts about how you portray a scene, etc. You're not thinking, right now I'm going to do a piece of work that could go in a gallery and could sell.
No,
because if you're thinking, now I'm going to do this thing and this will sell and I'm going to do it on this certain way and that's what the gallery wants, and I wouldn't say that is a crossover. That's something that's still very commercial, but what you've done, it's just organically come out in a different way, which is amazing. Sorry, I'm going on a bit now. I'll stop.
No, I think that's the answer.
Sorry, I had some audio problems, but now it's good. Yep.
I think that's the answer, the intention of why you're doing the work. And I think it comes back to this whole talk of how Christo's been talking about his whole work sensibility, his style, if visual language comes from his life and how he's lived his life and choices he's made. And I think to then go and kind of try and fit into a certain niche, that would be problematic, wouldn't it? And it would be completely rejecting your life. And I know we have to do that at some point, don't we? We do have to fit in a certain amount. But I think if you keep that intention to be true to yourself as much as you possibly can by stretching and pulling at certain times, that's the important thing. That makes sense.
Yeah.
What have we said there? So Lisa's very inspired. Brilliant. I love what you said, Bridget, especially about it not being separated as much anymore. What kind of cartoons have you been exploring, and does that relate to stories you want to tell yourself down the line? As you mentioned about possibly doing a children's book earlier, and clearly in your work you enjoy exploring cultural, society, narrative themes. We've only got 5 minutes left, but what kind of cartoons have you been exploring?
Yeah, when I was some years ago, I was reading an Argentinian author, this a classic, Kino, with Mafalda. Probably you don't know him. It's a very famous Argentinian, and he did a Mafalda. It's a character. It's a feminine character. It's a little girl, and she is asking a lot of questions and responding, and it's a very feminist character. And it's for adults, but it's really soft. But this like small cartoons that I really enjoyed. I'm going back with my children to these cartoons, and I love the format. There's like 5 or 6 vignettes, 6 squares, and you have like a small situations, and they're very funny and very critical and very political about feminists, about the Latin macho culture, about politics. Yeah, that was I was revisiting, and
If you could, when in a minute, I'll email you with the links that maybe you could, so you can maybe spell that name out for us in later on. But also, there's a couple of there was two people you mentioned in your talk as well, and it was to do with the people. There was an embroidery, and then there was a collage, and I'll get all of this stuff to you to Queen. Okay, brilliant, perfect. And we'll write it up on, we'll post it on
Mafalda, right. She's great.
Brilliant. Okay, so let's leave it there for now. So we're going to leave with your one, I left you with one piece of advice for the students. So I said, do you have one piece of advice you would give your younger self and budding illustrators starting out there now?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the last part.
Okay, so do you have one piece of advice you would give your younger self and budding illustrators, so new illustrators that are starting out, basically?
I think the most important thing that I will like to hear when I was in my 20s is no rush walking, having a John Cage walking, of course.
We're going to take that with us now. We're going to
watching and listening to ourselves, trying to listen to your instinct. That's helped me a lot of to listen to me, to follow your instincts. Turn off the phone, turn off the computer, and let the silence in. Let the void, let the quietness enter. To be quiet and just to hear your heart or your voice. And incubation, as I said, for me was really important because we live in a society that we have a huge pressure to be productive. And incubation time is as important as production times because you are by yourself. Probably if you read, if you watch films, you are feeding your soul, yourself. So you stop of consuming this image. We live also in this world of crazy world of pre-made images. Everything is done. Everything is. You get a lot of image in one day. You are overwhelmed at how much information you receive. So silence for me right now is like a luxury thing. So it's an advice that I will give. So no rush. Everything comes with the time. Enjoy your this incubation time, and take a walk. Take a John Cage walk.
Thank you so much, Cristo. Genuinely, it's been a joy this afternoon to see you again, to chat with you, to understand your practice, for our students to see that happen as well in real time. So it's been amazing.